Hi everyone, it's Lisa, and the date is the 14th of August, 2021. Actually, just barely because it's just past midnight. I wanted to record this because there's something going on in politics right now that's kind of interesting that could affect a lot of people. So I wanted to just get this out there. And I'm just going to get into my slideshow here. So we're looking at what could be a snap election. And these happen often enough that Wikipedia's got an entry on them. Snap election is an election that's called prematurely or earlier than the one that was originally scheduled. And the media have been covering this for the last day and a half about whether or not we're going to have an election call on Sunday, that's tomorrow. And the prime minister might end up calling an election for the 20th of September. So this is what everyone's speculating about right now. So my friends in the States began to ask, and like, do you guys have elections whenever you like? Could you have it at any time? And the answer is, well, sort of, because we got this fixed election law, and that's from 2007, Bill C-16, and it's supposed to set general elections or like federal elections for the entire country on the third Monday in October in the fourth calendar year after the previous one. And they were starting out October the 19th, 2009 on that. So there's this law, but there's other stuff going on here. For one thing, the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they have the maximum life of a federal parliament or government as being 5 years, not 4. The 4 might have come from being near the US and hearing all the stuff about their election cycle all the time. But the thing is that if you look at history, usually the elections happen sooner than every 5 years because there's a bunch of things going on here. Sometimes you got minority governments that are going to be brought down by non-confidence vote, where all the parties team up and they got enough seats to overwhelm the government, and it ends up falling, and they have to have a new election because of that. And it could happen because of a budget or a really major resolution, and the other the parties say we're going to call this a confidence motion because we really feel that it's time to have a new government. Another reason why this would happen is that the prime minister might decide that they got other time to go on their mandate. They might say, well, I've got another year and a half to go, but the polls are really looking good now. I don't know what's going to happen in the next year, so I may gamble on people not being too PO'd with me if I call an election too early, and hope that I can get a new mandate. So I might be able to get another government that could last for longer. Another one could be, they had this actually happen several times. We have minority government, somebody calls the election and they end up getting a majority in the votes. And that happened last year with the BC provincial election. So that could be in play as well here. So what's going to happen tomorrow is there's going to be all of these news cameras watching the front door of the prime minister's house to see if he's going to come out. And it used to be that he'd get into a car and drive to Rideau Hall, but he's not living at 24 Sussex Drive right now. He's living in Rideau Cottage, which is on the grounds of Rideau Hall. So he may just walk out his door and across the lawn to Rideau Hall, and in which case there's probably going to be a whole bunch of reporters running along behind him to see what happens. So this is called dropping or issuing the writs, or a writ drop. And so you might hear Canadian political junkies saying, has the writ dropped yet? And that's what they mean, is have they called the election yet? So that's a bit of slang. And here's a situation in Australia from 2019 where they're photographing the prime minister visiting their governor general, and the same kind of deal, because our governments are kind of similar in terms of the systems that they're using. So that's just an example of the kind of thing that could happen when you get the vice regal person to actually call the election at that point. Now, in Canada, they've got this law that says that the shortest you can have an election between the writ drop and the E-Day or election day itself is 36 days. So they have to give us some time. They can't just say, we're going to have it on Friday this week. And it's like, what? Everybody would freak out. So they've got to give enough time for the parties to campaign. So you can't have it shorter than 36 days. On average, the elections tend to be about 45 to 50 days in Canada. If it's 60 plus days, that's usually considered to be fairly long. And the Americans are probably laughing their asses off right now. Do you guys call that long? It's like, yeah, I guess, they can go on for basically years, their campaigns, the primaries and stuff. But no, in Canada, different political systems. So 60 plus days is thought to be a fairly long campaign. And they have to take this into account because it can cost a lot of money to keep campaigning that long. And the 2015 election was actually 78 days, which I think is a record for the last century anyway. of politics in Canada. Now, who can vote? Well, if you're 18 or older and you're a citizen, you can vote. In fact, you don't even have to be 18 right now. I mean, if you're 18 on election day, you can vote. So you just have to be able to prove who you are and your address. So you have to bring some ID to that. And anyway, so that's sort of the basic idea there. And if you're not sure if you're registered or not, go to elections.ca because you can check right there to see if you're in the database. And that's a quick way to do that. And if you actually receive one of these cards in the mail last time, if you are at the same place where you lived during the last election a couple of years ago, you're probably going to be okay. But if you've moved since then, and maybe you hadn't filed an income tax return because they ask you if you can fill up this box and they can put your name in the voter lists. If you haven't had a recent contact like that, then you may want to just check to make sure you're actually registered. But if you got one of these cards and you're still living at the same address, you're probably okay. And the card will probably show up not too long from now. And usually it's like a couple weeks before the election, these things will start to arrive. Anyway, so the other thing is who can contribute to a campaign? And the answer to that is if you're giving money to an election campaign in this country, if you're a citizen or a permanent resident, you're allowed to donate to election campaigns. If you're a tourist or you're a student who's just in the country temporarily, no. Also, the other rule is that if you're an individual, you can give, but no corporations, unions, or groups making donations. Now, the corporation thing, I mean, corporations are not people in that part of the law. So that doesn't count. Citizens United is a US thing. It's not us. So no corporations and trade unions as well. As unions are actually a fairly big part of some organizations in terms of their campaigns. And that's seen as being an unfair advantage. So I guess to make it fair, they said, okay, no corporations, but no unions either. And so that was the agreement that they made. And groups, if you're like a soccer team, for example, or a neighborhood association, no, again, you can't give. It has to be an individual human being. And also no indirect contributions. You cannot give money that somebody else gave you to donate in your name. You can't do that. And the other thing is no cash over $20. And I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's like if you have a jar of cash like that, you can't just dump it all out and say, okay, that's my contribution, because it looks to me like there's probably more than $20 in that jar, because I can see loonies and toonies, and those really add up. So, and this is to keep track of contributions. If you don't want these big envelopes stuffed full of wads of greasy cash from God knows where, you don't know who might be trying to buy an election then. So they want a paper trail is how it's going to amount. So if you're asked to give money when you go to a, say, campaign rally and they're passing a bucket around, yeah, you can put a $20 bill in, but you can't put any more than that in. What they're kind of probably going to do is they're going to count the number of people at the rally, and then they're going to divide by the amount of money that they get. And they have to be able to say that, okay, we aren't getting huge amounts of untraceable cash that are anonymous, basically. Checks, e-transfers, and PayPal and credit cards are all okay. A lot of campaigns are set up to have PayPal donations, for example. And anything over $20 can't be anonymous, basically. There's going to be some kind of receipt issued to go with it. And if it's over $200, they're going to need to get your name and address for the audit. Elections Canada will need to see who actually gave that money if it's a large, quote unquote, contribution of over $200. And the good news is, with all of these bits of paper going around, you can claim some of the contribution on your taxes. So the benefit to having this registered contribution is that you're now cleared to claim some of that on your taxes next time you file. Okay, so there's also these limits on donations. And the annual limit or limit for this campaign for 2021 has already been worked out at $1,650. So $1,650 to each registered political party as a whole. So the Rhino Party, you can send them a check to their headquarters. I'm not sure whether it's in Ottawa, but you can look it up online, and you can send them this check for the entire party. There's also a cap on the donations that you give to everybody in a particular party who's running as an individual candidate. So the ceiling for that is also $1,650 to a total of all the associations. So you have this riding association here in Victoria and another one in Hamilton, and all across the country, you've got these little riding associations for the parties. And say if you're, again, giving to the Rhino Party, then you'd be giving to the registered associations in different parts of the country and the candidates that are running in those ridings. And that total can't exceed 1650. So you're pretty well set up here. If you've got $3,300 to blow, you can give 1650 to the party itself, and you can give 1650 total to all the people that you know who are running for office, et cetera, and that should cover it, you know. And now, many of us, it actually could save us, because if people keep asking me for contributions, I have to say no sooner or later because I'm out of money. And well, my excuse is, I'm sorry, I'm going to get near my limit. I'm probably not going to get near my limit, but it makes a handy excuse anyway if people keep hitting you up. Anyway, so this is what the table looks like in the Official Elections Canada website. They give this new information for the annual limit. And again, 1650 to the party headquarters in Ottawa, for example, another 1650 split between the candidates for that same party for their campaigns. So there we go. There's other stuff that most of us won't really need to use. So yeah, if you have a leadership contestant who's running and wants money as well, you know, there's something like that. You can deal with that as well under the situation. But see elections.ca if you want to have any information on some of the other stuff here. But for most purposes, most of us are going to be kind of restricted to donations to the candidates who are running or to the party itself. You know, that's the general situation that people have talked to me about. You should keep track of what you're giving, because especially if you know people in different areas who are working for campaigns or are running in different areas, and if they're all in the same party, they might not be talking to each other, even if they are all supposedly in that same group together. They might not swap information around about their donors. So they probably won't tell you, oh, you're over the maximum because you gave to campaigns in Ontario and Saskatchewan and BC. And that would happen later on, and there could be some issues in terms of accounting problems if you forget. And say if I give $2,000 total, if it turns out that I've been giving like $1,000 to a friend who's running here in Victoria, and another $1,000 to somebody, somebody's son who's running, you know, in Winnipeg, and then another $500 to somebody's daughter who's still running in Thunder Bay. It's like, you know, that's going to add up, you know. So keep an eye on what you're donating. Also, keep in mind that they have these things called in-kind donations. These can be things rather than things you deposit in a bank. These are actual, like, physical objects, so things like pizzas or stuff to keep the photocopier running, for example. And if you're giving more than $200 worth of this stuff, that'll count towards your total as an in-kind donation. But the catch is you can't claim their value for a tax receipt. So it is going to count that $200 plus. So $250, say, if I say, oh, I'm going to buy pizza for the campaign. Well, that's great, but that's actually going to count towards my cap, my limit on the campaign donation. So I've got to make sure that I keep track of that. And also, I can't claim that as something on my taxes, you know, in-kind donations, no. Cryptocurrency, by the way, is still classified as non-monetary, so an in-kind donation. So no tax receipt if you give somebody Bitcoin. Decided this as of last month. Again, it hasn't changed, so that's the situation. That was how it was last time as well. So if you want to learn more about the wacky world of election campaigns in Canada, go to elections.ca, and everything you want will be spread out there. If you're doing stuff for school as well, they've got some interesting information up there. And the other thing you could do is to watch the next video I'm doing, which is what it's like to be an official agent for a Canadian election. All right, take care.